as time flies by, you'll open up your eyes wide. You feel it's gonna go your way. Hey, hey, it's a brand new day. Hey, 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 it's a brand new day.
This book has been written by my next guest. Helen O'Leary, what a pleasure to meet you. And what a pleasure to open a book that has lettering that you can actually read without glasses at my age. So I hear that was a happy accident, Helen.
It was, yes, a great surprise, but it does mean I don't need my glasses to read it either.
I know, lovely. And when I looked up Helen on internet, knowing that we were going to meet today, first, you're an artist. I mean, you're also obviously a very accomplished author. This book is, from what I've read, reads very nicely. But you're an artist first, it would seem.
Well, my father, about whom this book is written, was an artist, and he was very good, but I never really did it. I used to be an advertising copywriter, which was how I made my living, but I'd never wrote more than about 60 words on the trot. And then coming out here, of course, as Jesus said, the light is so wonderful, and it's really inspiring to do some painting. So I took it up when we came here, and still enjoy painting very much.
Well, I have to say that this book is a delight because it takes us through your life, but through the eyes of your family before you. And I thought it was just such a lovely concept of you hearing stories as a child, but then after your parents passing and coming across letters and things and realizing that your father was a little boy one day and how he lived his life, then going off to the First World War. It's a very soul-searching, it's very poignant book. It's very sad, really.
There is something quite strange about there's a father who you know, or you knew, is now suddenly a little boy, and you're looking at him from when you're much older than he was, and it's just fascinating to do that transition. But it is a little bit sad because, of course, he had a very sad background in a way. He was the 13th child of 15 children, and with an abusive undertaker father. So there was a lot to kind of crawl up from, which he did because he could draw. He was an artist, and when he went to war, because he could draw, he got sent to India to learn how to make maps. And then he was sent up through Mesopotamia, up the Tigris, drawing his maps. And he never shot anybody. He never came across a bad incident because he was making maps. Got dysentery, but that was the worst thing that happened to him. So he had a happy war, really. Got a little dog on his way up, found a little dog running around in the desert, and was allowed to keep the little dog. And so it was a good life for him, really.
It's quite an unusual war story as such. And
yes, but I think a lot of people down here do have these war stories, that somewhere there's a grandfather, there are letters tucked away, which is what I had. And people are always interested and always have fascinating anecdotes of their own, which I think is something. So after a certain age, you begin to look back. And of course, when the people have gone, they're no longer there. But I was lucky because my generations are so long in my family that I had all these memories as well as letters. So it was handed to me on a plate, really, to write
what was
this
it
book.
like growing up, hearing stories, but then when you were grown up, having that unique opportunity that most of us don't have, to then go into past letters and have this unique experience? How did it make you feel? I mean, it must be, it's quite unique and really to be able to write something like this.
Well, it was, but it was handed to me on a plate because I had all the letters and all the memories. It was just a matter of pasting them all together. So I was lucky. And of course, being here, having the internet and having access to so many facts, because I knew nothing about World War I or India or Mesopotamia in those days. And even when my father went to war, he went to South Devon with a cycling regiment.
I didn't even know they had cycling regiments until I read your biography.
And, you know, when he was 19, so that was a great excitement. And he got away from London, living in King's Cross, where it was very polluted and they were poor. He slept nose to tail with his, not quite nose to tail, I think, with his brother. But they slept together in one bed in
I
the
mean,
basement.
15 kids is a lot of kids.
It was a lot of kids, but of course they spread out, the generations spread out. And in those days, I think education was very much looked up at, and they had to keep their nails clean, they had to do their homework, and then they left school at 14 and went out to work. And my auntie Mabel, whom I remember as a very stern matriarch, she went and worked at the arsenal, filling bullets or whatever they did, and got good money for that. And Auntie Mabel did well. Some of them did very well and were lucky. Some were not so lucky. But none of them died. All the boys came back from war.
Which is wonderful.
Which was amazing. And my grandmother, who didn't have my father till she was 45, kept him up to the mark. And he looked after both his parents until he was 42. My mother, in the meantime, had been sent off to Australia to get away from him because he was considered rather a daring young chap and not quite up to the mark of Gloucestershire parents. So off he went. She went to Australia but didn't like that, came back, got pregnant, had me. So the rest is history.
More happy accidents. You came to live on the Costa del Sol. You're now on your own here. I'm sorry for your loss, but you seem to have adapted well. You're a cat lady. You have your cats.
I do.
And you write. Do you still paint as well? How do you keep yourself busy?
I do paint, and also I belong to the various art societies along the coast. There are 3 that used to be NADFAS, but they're very encouraging for any project like this. It was good to have friends around me when Tom died, and also the impetus I got from having like-minded people around me to get going on a project. I mean, it's quite hard to do, but it helps a lot to have the weather and like everything else, the encouragement of like-minded people and just getting on with it. Yeah, it was quite difficult, but fun because you can look up anything. And of course, things that you don't like, you can actually make up. Not that I did really, but some of the stories I did
embellish a little.
A little, yes. Well put.
Well, you're allowed to do that. You are allowed to do that. And I have to say, I enjoy reading. I don't read as much as I would like to. But the little bits I started to read through, the pages you marked, your style of writing is very descriptive without being wordy. It's not vocabulary where there's lines, it's very descriptive. You've got a nice grasp of language. It was a very easy read.
Well, that's what I get from my dad because his letters were fantastic. And although he left school at 14, some of his grammar was a bit sort of suspect, but it didn't matter. The way he describes things were kind of in his soul, and because he was constrained in a London basement for so much of his early life, to get out into the hills, the Himalayas, the foothills of the Himalayas, to go up into the desert was magic for him. And he never stopped adoring nature and being out in the country. And when he was very old, he would still go up and watch the moon rising, and he got a lot of pleasure from that.
Do you feel identified with your dad? Do you feel that
I do now, because I was so horrible to him when I was a teenager.
Aren't we all?
And this is really an atonement.
I'm so sorry, Dad.
Sorry,
it's a book
Dad.
to you, in your honour. But I think is that you can't understand things sometimes. You have to live it, get there yourself. It's only with hindsight, wisdom and years that we realise.
And writing a book helps, I think. I mean, even if you don't get it published, which I did, and it was all worth doing.
So we can get this on Amazon?
You can.
And any local bookstores?
Well, I haven't quite got there yet, but yeah.
Oh, we will do.
Yes.
We will do. Everyone
Yes.
make sure that you local bookstore, you've asked them if they've got Walter's War and The Compassionate Heart.
And it's very cheap on Kindle. So.
Yeah, but I have to say, I'm a book girl myself. I do like the feel, the smell, and these big letters. Yes, definitely my kind of book.
Good.
Pleasure to meet you, Helen. I hope we get to cross paths more often.
I hope so too.
And I very much look forward to reading the whole book.
I might write a next one now.
Go for it, girl. We'll be here waiting for you.
Thank you,
so
Nicole.
much. Free taxi 4 times a month and 25% discount on your car insurance if you're the Zero Hero. Wearing a seatbelt is fundamental. Even braking suddenly at 7 kilometers an hour, your body will be thrust forward with the equivalent weight of 3 to 5 tons. That's like throwing yourself off headfirst of a 3-story building. We wouldn't want to do that. We wouldn't do that out of choice. Now, when you're pregnant, a lot of people choose not to wear the seatbelt because it's true that the lower belt can actually hurt your uterus or even damage the fetus. However, there is an adapter now available that is a cushion that goes on your car seat, and when you get in the car, what you do is you put your seatbelt on as you would normally. So you put your seatbelt on, and now you're sitting on your special seatbelt adapter, and then you take the part that's between the legs, which is the optimum position to put the belt, so it's below your uterus, it's below the baby, and if any pressure is exerted in case of sudden braking, it will not hurt you or the baby. But it is fundamental that you wear a seatbelt, because if you don't, you're risking your lives, your baby's life, and that of anyone else who is with you in the car or around you if you go through that windscreen. It's fundamental. Seatbelt first, but when you wear it correctly. And in pregnancy, it's very important to position that belt below the bump so you're all safe.
Hey, hey.
Hello Marbella, it's Amanda from Silk and Sin here again, invited by the lovely Nicole King to help look at Marbella's problems and issues that they might be facing. And today we're looking at a problem sent to me by a Mrs. S, we'll call her. We like our pseudonyms, Mrs. S. And actually Mrs. Mrs. S and Mr. S. Now, Mr. and Mrs. S moved over to Marbella about 10 years ago, and they've been married for about 20 years. And about 6 months ago, the relationship had been going downhill, and they decided finally that they wanted to move on and separate and go their separate ways of their lives, which is understandable. This happens after 20 years, you change, you're a different person. They'd enjoyed 10 great years here together, but realised that the spark had gone. That's something that je ne sais quoi had gone, and they didn't want to carry on their relationship together. So they had a reasonably amicable splitting up. We all know what it's like. You start off with the best intentions and it doesn't always go that way. Now Mrs. S, or ex-Mrs. S, has written in with 2 queries, and they're 2 things that are connected. And A, she wants to know, I mean, we live in Marbella, which is like a village. Everybody knows everything. There are 2 degrees of separation. People know someone that you know, and we're all connected. It is village life living here on the coast, we have to admit. And she's going to bump into Mr. S, who's now got a new partner, as has Mrs. S, the ex-Mrs. S. And she's wondering how she deals with things when she meets him. And also adding to that problem is the second part of her query to me, and is the question of their friends. And a lot of their friends have been very divided by their split. Couples that they've known for years, the men seem to feel that they can't contact her, the women are very angry at him, even though Mrs. S has explained, the ex-Mrs. S has explained that it was an amicable parting and they both wanted to go their different ways. There are some questions of Mr. S's fidelity in the beginning, so that caused problems. And a lot of her friends are actually more angry about it, she thinks, than she is, and don't quite know how to deal with the situation. Now, 2 things I've suggested to Mrs. S. A, sit down, have a girly night, have a girly lunch, have a couple of glasses of wine, and explain to her friends that she's got no problem with them remaining friends with Mr. S, that the relationship had come to its natural end, it was the right way to go, and that they are still friends. Now, this takes it to the other part. She needs to sit down, maybe on somewhere neutral with Mr. S, and discuss what's going to happen when they do bump into each other with their respective new partners. Now, obviously, neither partner was involved, as far as we know, in the breakup, so there's no reason for bad feeling. These are now 2 separate couples. They are no longer together, they had a connection in the past. We have 2 couples. Now, why shouldn't their friends from their relationship invite them both out as couples? I'm not saying together, but remain as much friends with Mr. S as is as with Mrs S, and the men vice versa. Because these things always end up splitting down the middle. The man goes to the man, the woman goes to the woman. That seems to be the way it is. And actually Mr and Mrs S don't want this. So they're going to have a meeting and sit and talk about the difficulties they might experience when they bump into each other, maybe after a few drinks on a Saturday night in a restaurant or a club. But mainly they need to talk to their friends. And is this myth true that women that have split up with their boyfriends never get invited out as a single woman? Well, she now has a casual relationship, but I don't think that is true. And I think her friends need to be brought on board for both Mr and Mrs S's sake. They need that support from their friends, and they need to know that you don't have to take sides. In this sort of breakup, taking sides isn't necessary and is in fact unhelpful. Really support both your friends if you've known them and there is no major negative point on either party's behalf. Support them both, be friends with them both, and we wish Mr S and the ex Mrs S the very best of luck with their new relationships and with their future in Marbella, and a great summer ahead. Thank you very much. This is Amanda from Silk and Thin saying goodbye for now, Marbella.
Hey, hey.
It's already the end of the week. Can you believe tomorrow is Friday? We will be back with another Marbella Now at 8 o'clock in the evening. We hope you will join us. Recordings of that programme then come out the next day. And on Saturdays and Sundays, you do get our bumper compilation of all the week's programming in the morning, Saturday from 10:30 till midday, and on Sunday evening as well from 6 till 7:30. Do join us. There's a lot of things going on in our city, and we don't want you to miss out on anything. Hasta mañana. Take care of yourselves. Be nice to each other.
And as time flies by, you'll open up